Hey everybody, thanks for joining. I am really excited to be here at BlackHat 2025. I am Josh Summit and I am the creator of OWASP Faction. Faction is an open source security assessment platform built to help teams automate, manage, and scale their assessments. Whether you're a security consultant running pen tests for clients or part of an enterprise security team looking to standardize your process, Faction was designed for you. So what can you do with Faction? Well, Faction was built from the ground up to streamline the way security assessments are performed. Everything from setting up engagements, to assigning assessors, to writing findings, to generating reports is all part of a guided, efficient workflow that helps keep your team moving without getting buried in admin work. If you're still copying and pasting from old reports, you can stop with Faction. Faction automates the whole process. You can define reusable finding templates, insert custom variables, and generate client-ready reports in just a few clicks. No more hours wasted on formatting or version control nightmares. Whether you have 2 assessors or 20, Faction makes collaboration seamless. You can assign tasks, track progress, leave notes, and perform peer reviews all within the same assessment. No need to juggle spreadsheets, chat threads, or scattered documents. Faction also includes advanced scheduling tools that help you plan ahead and avoid overcommitting your team. You can view who's working on what and ensure no one is overloaded. Faction also makes remediation and retesting simple. You can set custom SLAs and receive automatic reminders as due dates approach. You can stay on top of risk and ensure nothing slips through the cracks. And most importantly, Faction is flexible and extendable. We couldn't design a tool out of the box that's going to meet everybody's needs, but we can design tooling that allows you to extend Faction to fit seamlessly into your diverse and complex environments. Okay, now we're going to go through a demo of Faction. We're going to do this in 4 phases. 1, the life of a penetration tester, then project manager, remediation, and then we'll talk about extending Faction through the REST API and our extension framework. If you've downloaded Faction from our GitHub repo, there will be a Docker Compose file. You can then just run Docker Compose up, and it will pull in the latest version of Faction, start a Mongo database, and start the Tomcat web server. Once it's up, you can go to localhost 8080 and log in. What you're going to be presented with at first, if you are an assessor, is your assessment dashboard. This has key bits of information about what you're working on and who you're working with and everything you need to get your assessment workflow. Down here in this corner is the Your Week, which is basically, think of this as you log in to work on Monday morning, you look here to see what you're going to be working on, who you're going to be working with, what assessment you're doing, what the scope of that assessment is, test credentials, any information you need to perform that assessment. Up here in the upper right corner is your retest queue. These are things that application owners or developers have said they've mitigated the issues, and they're putting it back to you to verify that their mitigations are complete. This section here is your assessment queue. This is everything that's currently assigned to you. This could be if you're having assessments scheduled yearly or having several a month. This could be everything that's been assigned to you throughout the year. Now let's go into our assessment. This, as a pen tester, is where you're going to spend most of your time. First, we're in the overview section. Here is where you're going to find information about who you're working with on this assessment, the project manager, remediation contact, a distribution list. This could be key stakeholders, people that get the report out meeting. This can be however you want to configure this. Over here is more detailed information about the assessment, maybe what team this is on, what type of assessment. The assessment could be a mobile or network security assessment. It's all configurable by you on how you set up your assessments. And then here is the date range for this assessment, when it's supposed to start and end. This next section contains assessment variables. These are completely optional and customizable by you. The options you have are strings, lists, and booleans. So in this case, we have a string variable. We have made it the assessment URL. We have added a custom variable for the type of assessment. This contains a dropdown that I've created that has mobile, web service, thick client. For this demonstration, we're going to keep it at web. And then to just further illustrate that these can be anything you want them to be, we've made just an optional list here for different features. You'll notice that each one of these variables has a code here. You can take this and put it anywhere into any free text form in Faction. When you generate the report, it will populate these fields with whatever value is in this section. You can also take these and include them in your actual docx template report. That'll be more of a global template that the entire report is generated from. The next section is the high-level summary and detailed summary. These, I will say, are suggestions. These are probably the most common free-form fields that you'll want to add to your report. But just like these custom variables, these are also just variables that get added to your assessment report template. You can use these however you want to use them. If you don't want an executive summary, you can make this something else. It's just whatever you type here, and wherever you put that variable in your report, that's what's going to go there. These are the most common things that people would use in an assessment, but again, they're fully customizable by you. The next section is the engagement info, just to make sure you have everything you need to do this assessment so you're not clicking back and forth into different pages. This is your scope, maybe instructions about this assessment that are unique, like the application owner wants critical findings reported immediately and not at the end of the assessment, and then test credentials, things like that. Over here is the ability to upload files. These can be anything from system diagrams. It could be maybe a CSV of networks and URLs that are within scope for this assessment. You can actually take other artifacts that you find during this assessment, upload them here so they're all saved with your assessment package. This is where you're going to actually enter all of your findings for the assessment. So let's demonstrate that by adding a new finding. In this case, let's add SQL injection. And notice we have all of our different templates immediately available to us. Faction comes default with over 75 templates for the most common web application security vulnerabilities. It will come pre-populated with the default severities. It'll come with a description and recommendation, but these are all fully customizable by you. You can start with our templates and then edit them and make them so they work for how you perform assessments, make sure the recommendations match what you recommend for your organization. It's fully customizable. The text forms are Markdown or WYSIWYG. So however you like to work, you can choose that option. And then down here is where the details go. This is things like your steps to reproduce, your proof of concepts, screenshots, things like that. Let's demonstrate this now by adding our SQL injection steps. So let's go through here, we'll add this. So we have our steps to reproduce, and then we'll need to add a screenshot. Let me grab that here and paste it. So now we're pretty much done. Yeah, so we have our evidence, we have our descriptions, our recommendations, everything's set up for this assessment. One thing I wanted to highlight quickly here is we also have custom variables for vulnerabilities, just like we did on the overview page. These are custom variables just specific to things that you want to log within vulnerabilities. This could be things where you maybe want a CWE number or a special tracking number, or whatever. It's made to be configurable for how you do your assessments and works for your organization. The next thing I want to show is we have a really good Burp Suite extension that integrates seamlessly with Faction. It uses our API, and it makes adding findings really seamless. So let me demonstrate this really quick. Bring this in over here. Okay, just like you have on that dashboard page, you have all of that information available inside of the Faction extension. So this would be your assessment queue, and this is your retest queue. If you click on these, you can then see what your scope of the assessment is. You can see all of the findings, and you can see findings that other assessors are logging into the system in real time, which is really nice when you see one of your coworkers comes up with a SQL injection vulnerability. You can just click on it, see how they were able to exploit it, and get the details. And then you can then take maybe their payloads, put them into your repeater, and try and exploit it further. One thing you'll note too is you'll see that these have an opened and closed date. That's because these are from a previous assessment. So this also helps you see what's been assessed before, what were the findings in previous assessments, and kind of help you figure out where you want to focus this next assessment. Also look at like what worked in the previous assessment to really make it easier to, find what particular types of output encoding or character combinations can get past things like your cross-site scripting and SQL injection that might be, just unique to this application. So, so that's, high level, everything about your assessment. You can also add findings directly through Faction. So let's say we have a cross-site scripting vulnerability here, and we've been able to fully exploit it so that it shows the script. So let's just go in and add this finding directly through Burp Suite. You have your templates available, so you can just search for reflected cross-site scripting, and it will populate all the different versions. Select that. Then let's go ahead and add our exploit steps, which the text box here supports Markdown syntax. What I think is really cool about this extension is instead of having to, be in the middle of exploiting something and then having to stop and go to some other system like a note-taking app or something else to document it, just while you are in the platform, you can just document it as you go. It's like as you're taking your notes, you're writing your report, which I think is what makes this workflow really powerful. So now that we have that, now that we have our steps to reproduce this, let's take note of these options here, request, response, and extract selection. So what this does is it will actually take burps, request and response, and if you have the extract selection, it'll just take that part that we selected, which is this part here, and only put that into your report. It also has the option to snip cookies, so if there's maybe sensitive data in cookies and you don't want to include that actually in the report, you can select that and it will clip them out before it logs them in Faction. So now we've got our XSS with all of our steps, so let's save that. Then let's go back to Faction to see what that looks like. So now you can see we have a new cross-site scripting vulnerability in the platform, and it fully documented our description, our recommendation, and we have our steps to reproduce here. Notice it, we have our attack string, and then we can show the request fully snipped out, and then the response with just the selection that we had selected in Burp. This in a way saves you a screenshot and still gives you the data that you need to just put right in the platform directly. One thing that's really cool about using this feature too is, let's say you're working with other assessors and they're finding things. Let's say they find a cross-site scripting vulnerability. If you click on the issue that they found, pulls up over here. If you use our platform, it actually creates this link here. So what you can do with that is just double click it and it adds it to your repeater. So this gives you a way to share payloads really seamlessly. If someone finds something, you can take their payload, immediately add it to repeater, and then replay it, and then maybe whatever this is will help you exploit part of the application you're working on. Maybe you just need to change part of the URL or something. It just makes it really easy. One thing that's really great about this as well is it works with retests. So if you have things in your retest queue, you can just pull this up, immediately replay that payload, going back to what the original assessor found, and just put it right in. Okay, now let's go back into Faction. We now have all of our findings fully documented, so we're ready to move on to the next step. One thing that we support is checklists. These are checklists that are completely customizable by you. You can make sure that they are added based on certain assessment types. Certain assessment types might have different checklists, like a mobile application might have a certain set of checklists that a web service assessment would have a different set of checklists. In this case, we've just added one of the most common ones in the OWASP top 10. And here you can make sure all your assessors remember to check all of the things. So did you check broken access control, injection? In this case, we have a failed injection finding because we have SQL injection and cross-site scripting. So we'll need to mark that as failed. And maybe some insecure design stuff. Then you can add comments if you like to further elaborate on why this failed. But these are things that are just shared with the assessment package just to make sure everyone is staying consistent. The next step is to start finalizing our executive summary. So at this point, we've got all of our findings. We've made sure that everything is consistent. We've done our checklists. Now it's time to just start wrapping up the report. One thing I have done throughout my career is a lot of assessments that I have performed, I have the same sort of boilerplate that I put into high-level summaries and risk recommendations and things like that, and end up writing these snippets that I like, and then from it have them in a note-taking app, and I would copy and paste them into the reports, or find old reports and pull out that verbiage and put it directly into my current report. Faction saves you a step here. We have templates for these kind of things. So for instance, let's go on and start with our executive summary. This would be maybe our common executive summary. This is generally how we start it. You might want to tweak this a little bit, but it's usually kind of a good boilerplate starting point to begin our executive summary. Notice this supports variables like we talked about before. You'll have the risk counts, the assessment team, things like that. So you don't have to update it and type it every time. The platform will manage that for you. So now we've got sort of an introduction to our high-level summary. We know we have some cross-site scripting, so we'll talk about our general recommendation that we have for cross-site scripting, and we have a conclusion that we can add to this as well. And then down here, I'm using this part as scope in my report. So I have a scope template that adds this table, and so we'll add a description. This would be like UAT URL, and let's go on and add this variable here to that. And then maybe there was another URL like an API endpoint. And let's just call that. And let's make this, let's just keep that there. And so we are now pretty much done with all the parts of our assessment. It's time to finalize it. So now we'll generate the report, make sure it looks like what we expect. Give this a second to build, okay, and then we're going to download it. Okay, so this template, we have about 8 templates on our GitHub. You can download them and use them as starter points to build your reports. We also have a docs.factionsecurity.com that has a list of all of our global variables. These are things like assessment name, assessment type, what the date, where the date goes, how to generate a table of contents, things like that. That's all set up, and variables that you can just add to your templates. And let's see how it generated everything. So we got this, we have our scope added, we have a high-level table of everything that was found. We generated tracking IDs for each one of these findings. And then we have our technical findings, which is more of our more detailed summary, everything that was put in here with our screenshots and steps to reproduce. So yeah, just like we'd expect. So at this point, we are ready to send this off to peer review. This is an optional feature in Faction. You can enable it if you wish. If you want to do peer review by sending the reports and do track changes or whatever through the docx files, you can do it that way. We recommend you do it through our peer review system, and let me show you how that works. So send it to peer review, and now it shows up here. Once in peer review, it has its own track changes. You can delete text, add text, and then you can add notes about this. I don't like this text, whatever. You can say information about like, hey, this should be maybe more descriptive. This doesn't fit our standards. Anything that you see that you might need to highlight related to this. Same goes with vulnerabilities. I'm gonna delete this just to prove a point in a minute. Then you can look at any files that were uploaded. In this case, we didn't have any. But then you can also check the checklist to make sure that they marked everything off and that the checklist matches. Like if you saw something that was a security misconfiguration in the vulnerabilities, you might want to highlight, hey, you should have failed that in a checklist. Things like that. So now we've done our peer review. We can complete, drops off, and let's go back into our assessment. One thing I want to highlight here, you'll notice as this report goes through different phases, you'll see a different status message up here at the top. If the report is in peer review, it can't be edited until it comes out of peer review. That just makes sure you're not messing up the changes that your peer reviews are reviewing. So once it's in peer review, it's kind of locked, and it will stay locked until you accept the edits that the peer reviewers have sent back to you. You will find that information here on the Track and Edit Changes tab, and you'll even be able to see each iteration of peer review that you've gone through. So you go through here, you can, just like you would expect through like a docx track changes, you can select this one and decide to reject it, or you can reject all or accept all, take their notes. And then you can look through here to see if there's anything else and make sure everything looks right, and then try and complete it. Note that it said, hey, there's an unaccepted edit in the SQL injection description. That was the demonstration I was trying to make. There's this tiny edit. You need to make sure, if there's something like punctuation or something like that, make sure that you actually acknowledge it. In this case, I'll reject it because it was just for demonstration purposes, but you get the idea. And so now our report is complete. At this point, we can have our report. We can download the final report, have our report out meeting, and then finalize the assessment. The key thing about finalizing an assessment is at that point it will drop out of your queue. Any vulnerabilities that are in Faction in this assessment will then go into our tracking system. And this would start like the tracking dates, which we'll talk about in the remediation section in a minute. So that pretty much covers the life of a penetration tester and everything that goes with that for generating and automating your reports and collaborating. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is the notes. The notes section is where you can store interesting findings that you have along the way. These could be things that like look suspicious, but you couldn't quite exploit them. They're not necessarily anything you would want to write a finding for or a recommendation for, but maybe just something that you want to share with the other assessors on your team. And also that since this gets saved with the assessment package, if it's a yearly assessment, this information will be available to the next assessor that comes around the next year to do the same assessment. So it might give them a good place to start. Maybe you saw something interesting, but you couldn't quite exploit it, but you still think maybe there's something there. You get to save it here and give someone else some context for the next iteration. And this covers pretty much everything that goes into the life of a penetration tester. Now I'm going to move on to a project manager or an engagement contact. So one thing that we really want to do with Faction is ensure you don't overload assessors. So we wanted to have a very robust scheduling system. We want to know who's working on what. It even allows users to put in when they're out of office or on vacation, so they don't get accidentally booked for verifications or for being scheduled for assessments. That can all be done in Faction. Also, when you're scheduling assessments, Faction starts to become your asset inventory or your application inventory. So this information can be populated, and I'll demonstrate that because we have this BlackHat assessment that we've already done. As you type it, it'll automatically populate it, and it will automatically set things that we've configured previously, like the assessment URL and our key stakeholders that go in the distribution list. Notice it's got a due date that is today. Notice that the assessors are not free for this time. So this is one way that we check to make sure you're not putting assessors into double booking them or things like that. So let's choose different due dates. Let's try and go to like here and apply, and notice everybody's free. And in addition, you can see everybody's schedule over here. So we can add our assessor, and then at this point we can put in our scoping information. Let me just copy that from my text editor over here to make this fast because I type slow. And there you go. And here again, this is what you saw in the assessor package is any files that you want to share. For instance, if this were a network security assessment, you might want to upload that CSV of all the different subnets and everything that would be part of that, system diagrams, whatever you need to give to the assessor to make sure they can optimally perform this assessment. Yeah, so that's how you would schedule it. We would save that, put it into the queue. And then now in search, you can see everything that's assigned to people. This allows you to keep track on, did the assessment get completed on time? Is it overdue? Do we need to change the due dates if we decide this assessment that we just assigned something happened and it needs to be pushed off another month? You can go ahead and reschedule it. Save that. And yeah, just everything you'd sort of expect. You can search by different assessors or engagement contacts. Everything you'd sort of expect to see when you're managing a large group of assessments. This section here allows you to upload a lot of assessments at once. So we have a download template, so you can download it. It's just a CSV. You can then, let's say you have 30 different assessments, or you do maybe the same assessments every year and they're scheduled at a certain amount of times. You can go on and just update that CSV pretty quickly and then upload it, and Faction will schedule that with the assessors and everything for you. So that makes that really easy when you're handling a large group of assessments. So you're doing like hundreds a year or more. This makes that workflow a little easier, so you're not having to just copy and paste stuff into the web forms, just doing it like one at a time through the main page. So yeah, that pretty much covers the engagement scheduling aspect of Faction. Okay, now we're going to move on to the life of remediation. There are two sections in the remediation workflow. There's the queue, and then basically the entire database of vulnerabilities that we have in the system. When you click on the queue, these are things that are alerts that are actionable, things that you need to follow up on. One thing about Faction is it allows you to customize SLAs for different criticalities of vulnerabilities. So, like, let's say, for instance, a critical or high vulnerability needs to be fixed within, let's say, criticals need to be fixed in 60 days, highs in 120 days. Those issues, when they are past due or are approaching a due date, will show up in your alerts dashboard as something you need to follow up on just to make sure it's not slipping through the cracks. So for instance, you can see on this dashboard we have a self-signed TLS certificate that the due date for that vulnerability is approaching soon. And then we also have a persistent cross-site scripting that is past due. We also have a verification on here. This is a retest that has been sent out to an assessor to verify that the mitigation has passed, and for some reason they have not completed that within the time frame that they were supposed to complete it in. So these are three things that someone in the remediation role would need to follow up on. So let's kind of look through this workflow. Let's say this one's past due. We have reached out to the application team, and they have let us know that this issue is going to be fixed in the next sprint. They had higher priority issues. They couldn't get to it yet. So we'll just annotate that here. So this way we have that history. In a few weeks, if it's past due, we can go back and see what the status of that is and be able to reach out to the app team again and say, hey, has it been pushed to the sprint? Are you guys ready for us to schedule verification? And there you go. It just makes sure you're not losing track of that information. Everything's contained right here inside of Faction. For this one that's a persistent cross-site scripting that's past due, let's say they've actually mitigated it. So at this point, they have a fix ready. They're ready for us to send it to retest. So at this point, we will schedule a verification. So let's select, say they will have it pushed into the QA environment during this time frame. And we can look at our schedules and see, do we have an assessor that's open? And we do. So let's schedule it during that time frame. And so that's it. Now it's in the pen testers queue, and it's actually going to show up in our queue as being out for verification now. And let's go back and put on our pen tester hat again and go over to retests. And we can see I have two different retests here. Here's the TLS certificate that we just assigned. So I'm going to click in here, and this would be my workflow for remediating this finding. I can download the full report, or if I scroll down, I have just the description and recommendation and any steps to reproduce just related to that. So I don't even have to really dig through the report to find what I need to retest this. It's just been made immediately available here. But of course, if I need additional context, I have the full report that I can download. So at this point, we can pass or fail it. We can add some notes that, yes, they assert, and we'll go in and pass that and complete, confirm. And so at this point, it actually goes back to the remediation queue, and you can see this verification is passed. So at this point, there is a slightly different workflow. So this is all depends on how you do your retests and remediation. In a lot of organizations, you can only test in lower level environments. You're not allowed to test these in prod. So we have a workflow for that. You could say at this point it is closed in development, that they have verified it in dev, it's closed in dev, and when you do that, it will leave a note here that this is closed in the development environment. At this point, it's actually still tracked by Faction. It will not be closed in Faction until you click close in production. So Let's say it's been closed in development, they're going to get it into the next release cycle, and then they've let you know that it's been pushed to prod. At that point, you can close it out, and it stops being tracked in Faction at that point. Let's say this thing's past due, it's out for retest, but for some reason it's something happened. They're not able to actually retest it. There is a few different options you can have. You can cancel the retest, and at that point it puts it back into just regular queue. So yeah, that's pretty much how that workflow works for remediation. There's a few other things you can do here. For instance, you can change the severity. Let's say this has gone back to the team and they've decided that there actually are some mitigating controls that weren't identified during the initial report. So maybe because of those mitigating controls, you want to change the severity to medium. And so we'll do that. And when you save it, it will actually tell you what the previous severity was and what the new severity was. So you can track that even change in severity through Faction if you need to. So yeah, that's pretty much covers the life of a remediation assessment flow. The final part of Faction that I want to talk about is how you can extend Faction. There are two main ways you can extend it. The first one is our REST API. So if you click on your profile, you'll actually see a link to our REST API docs. And down here, you will see your API key. So if you click there, it goes directly into the Swagger doc. And you can, from here, be able to do things like query any open or closed assessments. So in this case, let's look for any completed assessment. Maybe I want to take this data and do some reporting to upper management about the number of assessments I've completed this year and which assessors completed the most assessments. So we can just search for that, and then we have all of our data about our assessments. We have quite a few different options here. Everything here is related to assessments. You can add vulnerabilities through here to assessments. In fact, our burp extension that I showed earlier fully uses this API for everything that it does, everything from getting the default vulnerability templates to submitting vulnerabilities. All of that happens through this API. You can get an audit log. You can even add users to Faction or disable them. So if you have other systems that manage your users, like for instance, users have quit the company and there's an automated process for disabling them across other systems, you can integrate that into Faction as well. And yeah, anything from like verifications and vulnerabilities. So it's a pretty robust API. And the next part is more event-driven. Faction has an app store. On our GitHub repo, we have 3 different extensions so far at this point of this video that you can look at the source code and figure out how to extend Faction in different ways. I've already got 2 of these installed here. So I have a vulnerability chart plugin and I have a checklist plugin. What these do, the vulnerability chart plugin allows you to add custom graphics into your reports. So you can add a variable into your report template, and what it'll do is actually create a chart of all of your vulnerabilities. It'll look something kind of like that. You can, this is on our GitHub, you can take this and customize it to however you want, make sure it fits your theme. Maybe you want a pie chart instead of a bar chart. It'd be really easy to configure that. But that's one instance. These types of extensions all happen based on certain events that happen inside of Faction. So for instance, this one happens upon report generation. Also, we have a checklist plugin. very similar. You can take that checklist that is in Faction and you can actually add it to reports. So you might have certain checklists that you want to include. You might want to include that OWASP top 10, which items passed or failed in it. You can take that when the report gets generated. It's just a variable in your report template, and that'll get put into your report as well. On our GitHub, we also have a Jira extension. So what happens with that one is when the assessment is finalized, you can then take all of those vulnerabilities, put them into Jira, and then you can replace Faction's tracking number with Jira's tracking number, and it would feed back into Faction. So a lot of different things you can do with the extension API. I will highlight the docs here. So if you go to our site and go down to APIs, you can see, for instance, this is the App Store extension API. All of the methods that you can override, and here is basically a walkthrough of how we created the Jira extension and how it puts all these pieces into the platform and creates customizations and things like that. So yeah, you can create your own apps and share them. And if you decide to create your own app and you want it to be made to the community, you can let us know and we'll actually add it to our list of approved Faction plugins. Well, this pretty much covers everything I had time to show for you today. There is more you can find out on our documentation portal. Here is the links to everything about Faction. There's a link to our OWASP project. There's a link to our GitHub where you can download and use everything that I showed you here today. There's our link to our documentation portal. Has a lot more information about how you can configure Faction, use custom variables, how to use the APIs, everything. And then, of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. You can either submit issues through our GitHub, or you can go to factionsecurity.com and click on one of our contact us boxes. We're happy to help. Yeah, so it's been a pleasure to be able to share Faction with you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your BlackHat 2025 conference. Thanks so much.